Zarah. Zarah is another one of our PMU rescue horses. Zarah was actually on the P lines for 7 years before we got her. So she has been through that ringer of experience. So she has some trauma from that experience. So it's factory farming. The horses are handled in lots, not as individuals. They are in these large, long, like warehouse-style barns, standing tied to the wall, hooked up to a urine collection bag that has suction that sucks their urine away to where it's processed. So they often use draft horses or draft horse crosses because they're calmer and they'll stay put for that experience, and they pee more. So Zarah is actually half Percheron and half Appaloosa. She was the only horse that came out of, at least that came out in the rescue herd, from this one PMU farm that wasn't a purebred Percheron. So they were all solid black, except for Zarah, who was spotty and fancy. Unfortunately, in her case, I think that maybe translated into her being the one that they rode, and she hadn't been trained to ride well, but she definitely had had enough work from humans that she was terrified of humans. So it's pretty normal for PMU horses to be pretty terrified of humans because they're only handled minimally. They're fed, and then when there's veterinary needs, they're given injections. When it's time to trim their feet, which they don't do as often as we normally do for optimal care, but when it is time, they put the horses on what's called a tilt table. So it's what's used for cattle. So it's a squeeze chute, it compresses their body, and then it rotates and lays them on their side. So as you can imagine, as a prey animal, having your ability to move taken away and then laid on your side is truly terrifying. And then they use power tools to cut their feet, and so that also is loud and scary and terrifying. So when we got Zarah, it took us about 4 months to be able to touch her down her legs, and then another several months before we could actually pick her feet up and trim her feet. So luckily we got there by then because they were getting really long, and now she's totally fine about it. What ended up happening is we finally found an itchy spot down here on the back of her fetlock, and she just decided that that was quite pleasant to have scratched, and she could put up with that. Zarah kind of had a learning curve when she came here. She definitely would notice when we were doing things that made her feel better, and she was all about it. So winter blankets, she's a huge fan of a winter blanket. So where she came from was in central Alberta. It's probably really, really cold in the winter to stand on a concrete floor without a blanket and just stand. And so I think she'd probably been cold a lot in her life. She also has kind of an Appaloosa-y coat. Like, she has a pretty fine, wispy coat as compared to, say, a purebred Percheron would. As soon as we started putting her winter blanket on, it took a while to desensitize her to this big scary flappy thing that was going to go on her, but as soon as it went on and she realized that it helped her stay warm, she went very quickly from like, what's that scary thing, to like, I will stand by like a rock, just put it on me because it makes me warm. So that was fun to see. Zarah was also pregnant when she came to the farm, so we didn't know that. We knew that that was a possibility because they were downsizing the industry that she came from, and she probably would have been pregnant at that time of year, but it was the middle of winter and we really didn't have any way of knowing. So she was pregnant, and she had Bella. Bella is right in the field with us. We had Bella probably 6 months after we adopted her. So Bella's the only baby that was actually born here on the farm. So Zarah has come a huge, huge way in trusting people. She's come a huge way in, learning all the skills of being a horse, learning to lead well, learning to respect personal space, all these things. But she also has all that trauma from her earlier life, and she has a mild vision issue that's probably progressively getting gradually worse as she gets older. So sometimes she has big fearful reactions. So something will pop up in her visual field and she doesn't identify it right away, and she'll do a giant spook. So because of that, she's not a horse that's super safe for little kids. So she doesn't participate hands-on in a lot of our programs. She's sort of over the fence interaction. But we always say that we think it's because she had so many babies in her earlier life. She really understands the concept of babies versus adults, and she really gravitates to little kids. So whenever the preschool kids are here, she is at the gate with her head over, like, come touch my face, I want to interact. She really, really likes little kids. And I wish we could safely let them be a little bit more engaged with her, but it would be too much risk. So Zarah is half Appaloosa, and she has Appaloosa spots, so she's called a blanket Appaloosa. She has a blanket of spots over her rump, and then she's kind of a little bit rony through her body, so that's what the white hairs mixed in. And as Appaloosas do, she's getting a little bit more and more white hairs as she gets older. If you look on her left shoulder, you can see RJ is branded onto her, and that is the initials of the farm she came to. So it was Roy Jarvis Farms, and it was a hot brand. So you can see by the scarring here that it was done with a hot iron versus a freeze brand. So this was a very painful brand when they did that to her. And then back here she has another brand. So she has a small 6 and then she has a big 6. And we don't know what their code for identifying who was, but they also branded her back here. So she's got some scars from her past, both physically and emotionally. But she's happy now and gets to live out her days with her last baby, Bella.